Under Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, defense spending is on track to fall to its lowest level as a share of the economy since the end of World War II. We currently have the smallest army since 1940. The Navy is among the smallest it has been since 1915. It's 100 years ago. And the Air Force is the smallest it's been since 1947. When Ronald Reagan left office, our Navy had 592 ships. When Barack Obama took office, it had 285 ships. Today, the Navy has just 276 ships. The average Air Force aircraft is 27 years old. We have second-generation B-52 bombers. Their fathers flew the same plane as they're flying right now. This is not the United States.
Well, those are very stark numbers, but let's put some reality on that. If you look at U.S. armed forces, right now there are about 1,015,000 people in the Army. If you count active, Guard, and reserves, if you apply the same metric to the rest of the military, you get about 1.1 million more in the Navy, the Marines, and the Air Force. And yeah, compare it to the 1940s when World War II was raging. Look at that. More than 16 million people served in all the branches, so they all are way down. That accounts for what he said about the Army and the Air Force. Now let's talk about that serious naval hardware out there when they're actually moving big vessels around. The current count for big pieces out there, about 271 from 2015. If you go all the way back to 1915, as he did, 231 vessels. And yeah, World War II, again, very big jump, more than 6,000 out there. What is not being mentioned in all this, however, is what modern technology brings to the game and how modern weapon systems multiply force. You don't need nearly as many people, according to most military analysts, to project tremendous force out there. So if you're comparing fighting power, it's just not apples to apples if you look at these different metrics out there, Anderson. So because he doesn't do that, even though his numbers are basically right, we have to say that Trump's statement on this is true but misleading.
Well, what about U.S. in relation to other nations?
Yeah, well, that's really what counts, right? If you compare it based on military spending to the top 10 nations in the world, look, down here at the bottom, you're going to have places like South Korea, Germany, and Japan at about 41 billion. Jump up to the middle, you get the UK at about 56 billion. You get Russia up here with around 66 billion. Then it's Saudi Arabia, interestingly enough. Then China with 215 billion, but that's only 9 of the top 10. Add the U.S., and look at this, almost 600 billion in spending there, almost as much as all the other 9 of the top 10 combined. Anderson.
First, I'm signing an executive action to begin a great rebuilding of the armed services of the United States, developing a plan for new planes, new ships, new resources, and new tools for our men and women in uniform, and I'm very proud to be doing that. As we prepare our budget request for Congress, and I think Congress is going to be very happy to see it, our military strength will be questioned by no one.
According to Trump, he'd like to take things a step further by flexing the muscles of the U.S. military in a North Korean Red Square-style parade. In an interview with the Washington Post, Trump said that military may be flying over New York City and Washington, D.C. for parades. I mean, we're going to be showing our military. The Huffington Post reports Trump's transition team even floated the idea of including tanks and missile launchers in the inaugural parade, similar to what was seen in the massive military parades in North Korea. According to the source, the request wasn't granted, given how heavy the tanks would be and also because of the controversial optics. The Defense Department declined to comment on the purported request. But in an unusual move, according to the Pentagon, Trump will be having 5 military flyovers. The last time for such an occasion during an inauguration came during President Harry Truman's swearing in 1949.
Fighting is wonderful, but if you give them the right direction, boy, does the fighting become easier, and boy, do we lose so fewer lives and win so quickly. And that's what we have to do. We have to start winning again. We'd win with wars. At a certain age, I remember hearing from one of my instructors, the United States has never lost a war. And then after that, it's like, we haven't won anything. We don't win anymore. The old expression, to the victor belong the spoils. You remember I always used to say, keep the oil. But I will tell you, when we were in, we got out wrong. And I always said, in addition to that, keep the oil. Now, I said it for economic reasons. But if you think about it, Mike, if we kept the oil, you probably wouldn't have ISIS, because that's where they made their money in the first place. So we should have kept the oil. But, okay. Maybe you'll have another chance. But the fact is, you should have kept the oil. They said, Mr. Trump, we really think it's appropriate. And I did too, because I was getting killed in the press saying I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me. Great generals.
You said you knew more than the generals about ISIS.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I probably do, because look at the job they've done. Okay, look at the job they've done. They haven't done the job. I will find within our military, I will find the General Patton, or I will find General MacArthur. I will find the right guy. I will find the guy that's going to take that military and make it really work. Nobody will be pushing us around.
With this selection, Trump would have the most retired generals in modern history working in his cabinet, and there could be more generals on the way.
We must regain our ability to truly crush our enemies.
Flynn is controversial in military circles after several jobs dealing with Middle East terrorism. In 2014, he was pushed out as head of the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency. One official who served with Flynn at the time tells CNN there were ongoing tensions. Flynn wanted more authority.
Lock her up. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Lock her up.
He's tapped to be President-elect Trump's closest advisor on the most sensitive threats facing the nation. And tonight, there is growing criticism that his inflammatory views make him unfit for the job. More than 50 progressive nonprofits, ranging from religious to social justice organizations, signed a letter asking Trump to dump Flynn. But the groups also raise more substantive allegations. On one occasion, while overseeing intelligence in Afghanistan, former government officials tell CNN that Flynn shared classified information from another agency with Pakistan. Flynn told CNN the allegation, quote, is not true, not even close. But the incident led to an informal reprimand, though no charges, officials tell CNN. In his public statements, Flynn has repeatedly dabbled in conspiracy theories. Just 1 week before the election, he tweeted, quote, you decide. NYPD blows whistle on new Hillary emails. Money laundering, sex crimes with children, etc. Must read, end quote. Allegations that remain entirely unsubstantiated. Flynn's son, Michael Flynn Jr., who served as his aide, has been a leading proponent of a bizarre fake news story alleging that a D.C. pizzeria was home to a child sex ring visited by Clinton campaign staff. The story led an armed man to enter the restaurant this weekend, he claimed, to investigate the allegations. He was arrested only after firing several shots. And yet on Sunday, Flynn Jr. was still defending the conspiracy theory, tweeting, quote, until Pizzagate proven to be false, it'll remain a story.
A top member of the president's national security team is under investigation this morning for his contact with Russia. CBS News has learned investigators are looking into at least one phone call in December between National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and Russia's ambassador to the United States, Sergei Kislyak.
The call came on December 29th. The same day, the Obama administration expelled dozens of Russian diplomats and announced sanctions in response to the wave of cyber attacks during the presidential election.
During the transition, I asked General Flynn that whether or not there were any other conversations beyond the ambassador, and he said no.
U.S. President-elect Donald Trump says he will appoint retired Marine General James Mattis as the new Secretary of Defense. Nicknamed Mad Dog, the general oversaw wars in Iraq and Afghanistan as the head of U.S. Central Command.
Actually, it's a lot of fun to fight them, you know. It's a hell of a hoot. It's fun to shoot some people. I'll be right up with you. I like brawling.
Mattis is viewed as a hawk on Iran, calling it a special case that must be dealt with as a threat to regional stability. That stance has also shaped Mattis' approach to the conflict in Syria. He is in favor of arming the Syrian rebels in order to oust Bashar al-Assad and strike a blow against Iran. But that could put him at odds with Donald Trump. Another issue where the two might differ is over Russia. Mattis has criticized what he calls the dangerous mode of Russian leadership. He's also warned NATO allies against accommodating Russian violations of international law.
We must finally recognize Putin wants to be our enemy. He needs us as his enemy. He will never be our partner, including in fighting ISIL. He believes that strengthening Russia means weakening America.
I think right now the most important thing is that we recognize the reality of what we deal with Mr. Putin, and we recognize that he is trying to break the North Atlantic Alliance, and that we take the steps, the integrated steps, diplomatic, economic, military, and the alliance steps, the working with our allies to defend ourselves where we must.
Many have supported the waiver legislation in your confirmation because they believe you will be, to paraphrase Thomas Jefferson, the saucer that cools the coffee.
What about the president himself? Under what circumstances will you advocate for your views forcefully and frankly?
On every circumstance, Senator. Senator, it's not my role to comment on the president-elect's statements other than to say I believe it shows he is serious about getting the best bang for the dollar. My view is that nations with allies thrive and nations without allies don't. And so I would see us maintaining the strongest possible relationship with NATO.
Donald Trump again made some controversial comments about NATO, and our allies aren't happy about it. The New York Times published an article Wednesday that quotes Trump as saying he would only protect fellow NATO nations if they fulfilled their obligations to us. The folks at NATO didn't take that comment too well. The Secretary General says he doesn't want to interfere with the U.S. election, but released a statement saying solidarity among allies is a key value for NATO. This is good for European security and good for U.S. security. We defend one another.
Let me tell you, NATO is obsolete. The other thing that's bad about NATO, we're paying too much. We're spending a tremendous billions and billions of dollars on NATO.
You're saying it's obsolete, though. You have now Vladimir Putin invading Crimea, annexing part of Ukraine, annexing Crimea.
Let me tell you about Ukraine. First of all,
there are a lot of people who think NATO is more important than it's been in years.
You have countries that surround Ukraine. They don't talk. They don't seem to have a problem. I'm not saying go in. I'd say you'd be very strong. You could be strong without necessarily even being into NATO, the money we spend. The money we spend is astronomical on NATO. Okay.
You really believe NATO's obsolete?
I think it's largely obsolete, yeah.
Donald Trump has been tweeting about nuclear policy. That's unusual. In a tweet, look at this. The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes.
We have actually been letting our entire system decay. So I think this is a good tweet. I think it's an important message. And it says to people like Putin, look, we can be friends or we can be opponents. If we're opponents, we're bigger than you are, we're richer than you are, we can ultimately outproduce you.
Donald Trump doubled down on his recent tough talk, saying he's willing to start a nuclear arms race with other nations if necessary. According to Brzezinski, the president-elect said he will make sure the United States will, quote, outmatch and outlast all of its competitors if an arms race is inevitable.
Somebody criticized me the other day because they asked me what I'd do, and I said, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them.